Hello and welcome to the Game Football Podcast from The Times. On today's show, it's time to pick your side. Team of champions who always try to win versus the upstarts with the crafty tactics in the box. And inconsistent refereeing or stupidity of the highest order when it comes to soft red cards. We'll be dissecting Manchester City 2, Arsenal 2 and trying to work out the answers to those questions and much more. We'll also discuss another cracking 2-2 draw between Brighton and Nottingham Forest, find out why Palace v Manchester United was weird, and chat Tottenham and 3 teams at the bottom as well. I'm Tom Clarke, and joining me we have the senior sports writer and Sunday Times columnist Alyson Rudd, the European football expert Tom Allnut, and a former footballer who played much of his career at left back but never quite scored a goal like Riccardo Calafiori. It's Gregor Robertson. Right, I missed you so much. 2 weeks away. I missed you so much. So I just wanted
missed
to
you too, mate.
Thank you. Oh, fucking bloody hell. How many times do I have to say it before? Got a bit of a response.
Weird,
yeah, anyway. But I just wanted to kind of, check. I wanted to make sure I got your voices in my mind. So I just want one word from each of you to describe the big game, just so that I've got a sense of your presence in the room. Alyson, that one word for Manchester City 2, Arsenal 2.
Bipolar.
Bipolar. Very good. I knew I could rely on you to say something a little bit different. Tom Allnut, one word.
Tempestuous.
Tempestuous. Bipolar, tempestuous. Gregor Robertson.
I'm going with engrossing.
Engrossing.
Good one, yeah.
Which is nice in a Scottish accent. It certainly was all of those things. I was worried you were all going to say bonkers, because that's the kind of classic line for these kind of games, because it was a bit bonkers. But I wanted to start with my usual question, broader question than the one-word answer, which is the classic, basically allows them to say whatever they want, really. Who was this result better for in the grand scheme of things? Because it was one of these where draw feels like a defeat for Arsenal. Manchester City showing they're still the dominant team, but they were playing against 10 men for large parts of it. Couldn't quite get... We've had this a lot with City-Arsenal games where you come away from it going, who's come out better here on the grand scheme of things? Tom, I'm going to start with you.
Arsenal, I think. I think at the start of the match, if you'd said you're going to the Etihad at the end of a tough week, having played away at Spurs, gone away to Atalanta on Thursday night with 2 days, was it, less rest than City. You're going there without Odegaard, your best player and captain. I think you would definitely take a point, and I think it's easy to get sucked into the minor details of the game, and of course we will, but and it's a sucker punch, no doubt about that, to concede right at the end after what was an incredible defensive effort, to be honest. But I think they would have taken a point 100% at the beginning of the match, and I think in the immediate aftermath of that match, I think the players would have been gutted in the changing room. They would have felt like they'd lost the game actually after defending so resolutely for that second half. But I think as the days go on, maybe tomorrow, next couple of days, I think they'll look back and realise that actually that could be a really important point. Because you said the grand scheme of things, Arsenal have now gone away to Aston Villa, away to Tottenham and away to City, and they've won 2 of those and drawn 1, and they're 2 points off the top, and they've had a couple of injuries, a couple of sendings off. And in the second half of the season when they play City at home, I think they'll look back on this and think it was a really good draw to get.
Yeah, well, that's what we're here to do. We're here to provide the context from the chaos. That's what we're here to do. Gregor, we've mentioned defending so much already, and you might have never banged one in the top corner like Calafiori, but I bet you've put your body on the line plenty of times, thrown it around in the box, blocks. Just tell us a little bit, to Tom's point there, about how Arsenal defence must have felt when that John Stones goal went in.
Oh, I mean,
the worst feeling in football?
Well, yeah. Gabriel pulling his shirt over his head and then having a ball bounced off it. It must have made it even worse. Yeah, it was remarkable. As I say, the word engrossing, because I also watched this knowing what the result was, because I'd been at Brighton Forest,
right,
and it was still engrossing. So I watched it when I got home, and I knew that this was coming. I listened to the final stages on the radio in the car on the way home, and I was like, oh my God, are they going to see this out? Are they going to see this out? And then boom, So, but just watching a team defend with a back six and nobody up top, and watching Man City, I also saw, watching Man City just kind of knocking it around the penalty box, almost into the penalty box, and not quite knowing what to do, not being able to break through that kind of wall. It was engrossing. It was it's the kind of thing you don't see very often, and particularly in a game between 2 of the kind of elite teams in the country. It was, defending like that though it was great in the first half too, actually, because Arsenal have had a back four, and the difficulty was, I mean, James Gearbart's kind of touched on this in his piece in the game today, is that watching someone like Calafiori trying to defend against a wide man, but also having to kind of negotiate the spaces in between him and the centre half, and make sure that there's cover from someone like Thomas Partey and stuff. That takes enormous like organisation, concentration, all those things. And they did it pretty well. And then they also had spells where they kept the ball. But then to flip that to be basically Calafiori was like a fourth centre half in the second half, and Martinelli was playing like the fullback. And there'd been a lot of talk about how City laboured to kind of, they looked like one-dimensional. Why was Ruben Dias kind of sitting in front of the man taking the shots from? I mean, when there's no space, you go wide. The Arsenal don't care. They're never saying you should stretch the play. They don't care. Go wide. That's great. We want to keep you anywhere but away from our goal. And then people are saying, why was someone like Foden not in Dias's position? Because they still need to worry about the break. They still need to. What are you going to do? You're going to take him off and replace him with someone who's an attack-minded player, and he's the guy who's got to have the defensive instincts, or you're going to put him up front or something, which is pointless as well. So it was a almost unique circumstance. People were really critical of City, and it's understandable, but breaking that down is almost harder than it is to be the defensive structure trying to repel it.
So does this mean, from the defender's point of view, you, like Tom, give Arsenal the vote for who this result is best?
Yeah, that was a long way of not answering the question.
I did say it allows you to say whatever you want, and you proved my point.
Yeah, because I think also it's just another step. It's Arsenal taking another step towards kind of, underlining that they are a real contender, and like also the kind of parallels that are being drawn even in the build up to this game and subsequently between like Arteta and like Mourinho, or the kind of the different way that he now sees as a kind of route to defeating Man City. And like, I'm here for that. I'm totally here for that. I don't think every team has to try and outplay Man City. And Martin Samuel's written about that today in a kind of slightly questioning tone about, would City have done this if they'd gone down to 10 men? No, of course they wouldn't. But there's nothing wrong with taking this approach.
No. Alyson?
Well, that's why I called it bipolar, because you had, in the first half, you saw the best of Arsenal, where they never forget their defence priorities, and that's what their team is built on. But they were, the way they attacked and their set play routines, it was just classic new Arsenal, wasn't it? That you saw the best of them, I think. And then in the second half, it's interesting, Gregor, you talk about City having to worry about a breakaway. They had no intention of scoring on the break. They had no intention of ever getting upfield and doing
Someone
anything.
still has to be there, though. Someone still has to. Normally, you have one player sitting on the halfway line because there's someone to occupy them. When that player's not there, Diaz was like, "What? I've got to join in here." But you still have to have someone with defensive instincts.
But also with set pieces. I mean, you could have taken Diaz off and brought on Foden and played him centre back. Fine, you're preparing for them having the ball around the edge of the area. But Arsenal got 2 or 3 free kicks, didn't they? And you know how good they are from a corner. And there's no way Guardiola can say, "Okay, you have a corner and we haven't got our defenders on."
And like a goal kick, they would put it up, and Havertz would run and just jump into them.
Yeah.
They're doing anything to kind of to put them off, to get a throw in or whatever higher up the pitch. You still needed a centre half on the pitch.
I mean, I also assume, you know this more than I do, Gregor, but I think that the thing with kind of Akanji and Diaz seemingly having all the ball, which was obviously incredibly frustrating for City fans, but I think Arsenal allow that to happen. That's not just because City are passing it to them all the time. It's because Arsenal say, okay, you give the ball to your centre half, and that's the one player we're prepared to say you can have it. As soon as it goes to Foden out wide, or it went to Kovacic or Grealish, the defending was so much more intense. They closed them down right there, didn't allow them to turn. They're trying to guide the possession, guide the ball, aren't they, all the time to the guy they know who can't really affect the creativity and the danger that City wanted.
But the repetition of City's attempts to get something was frustrating, I think, because...
So are you being critical of City or Arsenal? I can't work out whether
No. I've honestly never seen I've seen smaller clubs behave that way, but I've never seen a team that's in with a chance of winning the title take such extreme measures when they've had a man sent off, ever.
As in, you mean
Ever.
Arsenal's approach of
Arsenal's approach
we're
of
2-1
six at the
up,
back.
we can
Yes.
do 45 minutes of this.
Yeah,
no
that
problem.
was extreme.
Is that not? I was with you and thought, the 10 men, they can still create chances. But kind of halfway through, I was like, this is more impressive. This is more impressive defensively to come out and go on then, 6-3 and a keeper. Let's see what you can do.
Well, it was it? I don't know if the word's impressive. It's brave because they clearly didn't care what anyone thought about them. It was, and that's why I said bipolar.
Yeah.
We saw two completely different Arsenals just because one man was sent off. And I accept what you guys are saying about the need to keep defenders on the pitch, but City's, I found it very frustrating. They couldn't see how if you get a man wide or get behind,
You couldn't.
you and just cross, you have the randomness of a ball in the box, which is essentially how the goal came anyway. If you've got to create chaos
I think they did
in
quite
a
lot of
packed
that.
area, and
I
then
think
you'll
they did
get
a lot of that.
a chance to poke it in, or it'll rebound in, or there'll be an own goal. They were far too patient, City.
I think they did a lot of that. I think they threw in crosses. David Raya came and claimed them. Defenders headed them clear, blocked them. You saw at the end when Gabriel Jesus came on, and twice Silva tried to twist him up on the touchline, and he pounced and intercepted. Actually, he tried to do too much, which gave away the corner that kind of preceded the equaliser. But everyone was kind of like completely committed to the instructions, which was to keep allow players to have it wide, close them down. But if crosses come in the box, that's going to be part of what we're going to have to do in this half. We're going to have to defend the box, and part of that's defending crosses, and they backed themselves to do it.
Alyson, just to check, 3-0 to Arsenal on the who this draw was actually a win for.
Yeah, well, yeah. I think it'd be quite hard to argue it wasn't, because they were away from home and they were a man down, and they did play well in the first half. There was a lot that they can take away from it, and they did something very unusual in the second half.
Yeah,
the asterisk there is that at the end of the match and at the beginning of the match, I agree with that. But there was a point in the middle of the match where Arsenal were 2-1 up, 11v11, and it looked to me like they could go on and win the game. They were playing better towards the end of the first half, and you thought this is a massive opportunity here for Arsenal to go and win at the Etihad. When you got that kind of flow and momentum, and you feel like City are sort of losing their shape a little bit. And I think at that moment you thought this is a great chance, and maybe we'll come on to it. But I think in a way, if you look back at those kind of matches, you go a long way back to the kind of Arsenal against United games when they won at Old Trafford, that Sylvain Wiltord goal, when they won 1-0 en route to that title.
Yeah.
And I sometimes think you need that kind of win, almost to beat City in these title races. You almost have to do something extraordinary. And this was a remarkable point for Arsenal, and I think it is a good one. But there was an opportunity there in the middle of the match for them to go and win the game, and ultimately it was a moment of stupidity, which meant that a draw became a good result.
Well, let's come on to it. And it's nice to see how 2 weeks away you're still teeing me up beautifully, Tom. That's wonderful stuff. Yeah, Leandro Trossard, second yellow card, red card. I mentioned it at the top, inconsistent refereeing or stupidity. To me, the only real question should be how many weeks' wages is he going to get fined? Because, truly the most bonkers bit of play in the 47th minute ever, isn't it? Not only after Declan Rice kicked the ball away and got booked. The acting is surely you should just be going, "Oh, I'm such an idiot," rather than pleading with the referee. Is anyone else in disagreement? Anyone else actually think there's some refereeing question marks here? Alyson, there's a qualified referee?
Well, as a qualified referee, I would have booked him for the challenge.
Well, exactly.
So I thought that was a yellow card offence.
It's a decent barge, that.
Yeah, it's a barge though.
On the Gregor Robertson bargeometer, where are we going there? Is that just before yellow card? That's quite bad. If you'd taken that like a proper shoulder charge.
Yeah, I don't think that's a second, and particularly after the discussion we had the other day about how there seems to now be a different bar for second yellow cards as opposed to first yellow cards. I don't think that was a second yellow card.
But what about the stupidity point of
then the
kicking
kicking
the ball
away? Yeah, it was one of those where the time that elapsed between the referee's whistle and the boot, the Abbott was not a lot. It was maybe 2 seconds.
Careful, mate. You're the one who says we don't need more rules and more VAR. We don't want to kind of clock. Right,
well,
can we see what the time check was between the whistle?
Well, I think what you saw Arteta saying to the fourth official kind of quite vociferously on the sidelines was that you see that hundreds of times a weekend. They're like, it's not blatant. It's not. But I know that there's a kind of crackdown on this now. But it wasn't like, the ball, loads and loads of time elapsed and then he booted it away. It was still kind of
but not in the context of the Declan Rice incident and how much that was discussed. Surely, like as Tom says, in the opportunity, like we're 2-1, we turned this around. We looked the team in this.
It's daft. I'm trying to defend them, but there's not much defending. I had a little bit of sympathy for him because you do see that happen quite a lot, and nothing happens. The referee just goes off. Maybe gives him a warning, particularly if he's already on a booking.
So you think,
there's no way he's playing that as a pass. Like, Arsenal didn't play a pass like that all day. There was no one out there, so he wasn't playing it out to the left or anything, was he?
No, but there was someone about to. He was about to confront someone, so it could have been a clearance. It's like there's not much defending him. No. There isn't much.
No, I even think the Doku. People are saying, they should have booked Doku, but I thought it was a different thing. You could see with Doku that Michael Oliver was pointing. The ball is back there. The free kick is back there. So Doku, maybe slightly kind of mischievously, toe pokes it towards the space where Michael Oliver is pointing where the free kick should be. So he's not booting it into space to delay a start. He's sort of poking it away to sort of say, look, go back to where it should be.
That's exactly what Declan Rice did, though. He didn't boot it away either.
No, but he flicked it away to delay the start. Doku is actually, in a way, trying to get...
finer points of toe poking and flicking here.
This is what we need to get into. This is what Arsenal fans are desperate for. This is what they actually want. So are you now coming... So is there a level of sympathy on the kicking away?
I think there's something we don't know about that. I don't know if Michael Oliver was actually directing Doku to do something or not. We're interpreting that.
Well, you can see that
we don't know. We don't
Oliver
know
was
what
pointing.
he means by that.
The ball was where it was, and Oliver was pointing about 5 yards away and saying it's not there, it's back there. And Arsenal wanted to take it. So Doku is saying, okay, look, if the referee is saying it's not here, it should be further back, I'm poking it over there. I don't think he's kicking it away.
See, this is what I've missed. 2 weeks away. You don't get this on a sun lounger in
Corfu. The Kyle
Corfu.
Walker one's the most interesting, though.
Go on.
Why? You can see why they're really angry about that. If the referee's called Kyle Walker over to speak to him and then allowed play to start before Kyle Walker's back in his position. I do have sympathy for him with that one. And Kyle Walker saying afterwards, would you have let play start if I was the goalkeeper and you were calling me over? And that's a fair point. I'll also slightly, he trotted back. I wouldn't say he ran back. He was a trot.
Yeah,
he could have got back quicker.
This is the fine margins. It's a trot. Was it a poke? Did it go far enough? Was it an have it that was strong enough?
He was back in position there. Like, he was actually back. It wasn't as if Arsenal played a really quick free kick and they're away and Walker wasn't looking. Like, he had about 4 or 5 seconds. He actually
was protesting before the ball was kicked. So I don't. Sympathy's limited for Walker, but I can understand still why they were slightly upset that was allowed to happen.
But you never see it. This is elitism discussion, basically, because Kyle Walker feels he's very important because he's captain and he should. How long? He was instructed. But how long?
He was instructed to come over.
You're instructed to come over because that's your job as the captain, right? But how long? How long are we saying you need to be able to get back into position? Because he was given plenty of time and he was back in position, and he didn't rush to get back in position, and he was in the place he wanted to be as he was sort of trying to work out where the cross was going to come from. That the goal was not scored because of it was scored partly because he had a bad game, but it wasn't because he was still on his way back from being at the other side of the pitch.
Somewhere Michael Oliver is listening to this and chuckling, going, "See, it's not that easy, guys. It's not that easy."
He had a good game. These are the things. It's 3 or 4 really tough decisions, and we're debating about them now. I actually think he got basically all of them right. And I think sometimes we love in these big occasions to kind of say there's refereeing controversy, and it was controversial, I guess, because we're talking about it. But he got the decisions right. And I hear this thing, okay, it's a really big contest, 2 big teams. Someone was saying there's 60,000 people watching. Could he not have just, sort of spoiled the game? It's not the referee's job to keep a contest interesting for everyone watching on telly. It's really not. It's Leandro Trossard's job not to boot the ball away and get sent off.
So how many weeks
to be applied? And he applied the rules, and that's his job.
As I said, at least a month's fine for Leandro Trossard.
Tom is the new voice of reason. He's got his sensible,
absolutely,
completely sensible.
Well, you've started shouting at clouds this season, haven't you? That's why. You've hit 40 and you've gone over the other side. Anyway, let's talk about a little bit of football, because I wanted to talk about Kyle Walker again to get the defender's view. Because I thought his marking of Gabriel, having tried it once and Gabriel got in and headed just over the bar, the second time with the little touch, tap, It was basically what I thought was the modern defender's equivalent of when a goalkeeper dives for a shot that's in the top corner and you're not going to get there anyway. So there's no good going tap, tap, I've got you.
I mean,
and then he just runs round the back, round your shoulder. That's shocking, isn't it?
It just illuminated his error even more, I think, really, didn't it? The error that followed.
But is it not interesting, though, because you have been extolling the virtues of Arsenal's brilliant set-piece work
This
for
is
a
a great
long
routine.
time. It's a great routine, but is there not something, again, where we can be a bit critical of City and going,
yeah, and you heard...
shouldn't you not be drilling this every single day of the week when you're about to play Arsenal?
But, I mean, the way they did it was brilliant because, as I think Hamzah wrote about this recently, that, clearly the rules have been sort of tightened a bit around blocking and stuff this season. So Arsenal found a new way of doing it. As opposed to, instead of putting Ben White on the goalkeeper and constantly sort of, and him doing the same thing, the little touches or pulling his glove or whatever, anything to put him off, they now manipulate a situation where several bodies, several big players move into the area around the goalkeeper. That's also dragging defenders in there. It creates a real kind of wall for a goalkeeper to get through. And you heard Gary Neville and Jamie Carragher kind of debating whether Ederson could have come and got his hand, that kind of, not catch it, but get one of those ones where you just get a hand to flick it away. But it would have been a real feat to get through that many people. And it creates the space as well for someone like Gabriel, who's outstanding there, to attack. And he just takes everything. He took Calafiori out of the way as well. And Calafiori did brilliant too. He kind of barged, just a little detail, just barged Guardiola.
But you're happy with all of that? You're happy?
It was brilliant. It's genius.
Yeah. You're not,
it's brilliant.
Not like, a few Tottenham fans in the office saying, look, I'm still annoyed about the North London derby. That should have been a foul as well. You're all right with it?
No, it's brilliant. I mean, what's wrong with all they're doing is strategically asking runners to strategically surround the goalkeeper, and they're not actually necessarily, being physical with them, which in the past they have, and they know that's why they do it this way now. So it's both creating the space for Gabriel and surrounding the goalkeeper so that he can't come and get it, and it's very hard to stop Gabriel.
The most fascinating bit, I thought, was that both Sky and BBC chose to do split screens for the attempted header and then the one that went in.
You mean the one that he headed over first?
Yes, so that you could see how it was a set piece that even if they hadn't prepared properly for in the week, that within the game they should have seen it was coming, right? So they had a split screen and they showed how similar the actions were, and in both, Ederson falls over in exactly the same manner.
He tries to buy fouls a lot.
Exactly, but you kind of think, whoa, the definition of it in insanity is repeating things. It didn't work the first time. There's absolutely nothing different about the second time, and he does exactly the same pratfall. So, and you think, well, come on, they deserve to concede at that point because they've not applied any ingenuity or imagination. They've gone for that. Well, we'll play victim to the harassment we're being given, as opposed to thinking, how do we deal with it properly?
But Romero did the same thing against Spurs last week. Exactly the same thing. Went down, didn't he, looking for the foul, and when Arsenal headed it in from the corner. And I think what it is that Arsenal are so physical and, they push people about a lot. And I think these days keepers aren't used to it and defenders aren't used to it because I think people have got accustomed to referees giving free kicks. And so you get defenders and goalkeepers taking that risk where they think, well, someone's getting in my way and pushing me about. I'm going to go down and try and win the free kick. When actually I think Ederson has the advantage. You've got huge levers, big arms, come out, clear people out and get the ball. And I think Nketiah should have done the same thing. Exactly. You have to be more aggressive, I think. You can't, not only can you not, fall over and look for the free kick, but you have to say, ultimately, I've got the height, I've got the advantage, I can use my hands, and you go through people. And if people get in your way, then maybe you will get a free kick en route, but I think it's his job. And also, I think City defenders and Spurs, it was the same thing. You have to protect the keeper, right? Why are they allowing whoever it was it Calafiori? I can't remember who was getting in the way. They had 2 or 3 Arsenal shirts around Ederson. I think as the defenders at City, you've got to get in there and say, you're not getting here. I'm between you. And then the referee comes over and he says, you two have to stop. And then the referee's looking at it. You have to play that whole game. You can't allow 2 or 3 Arsenal shirts to be on Ederson.
That comes back to their ploy, which they've done for a long time now, is where they start the runs on the defender's blind side behind the goal. Most teams line up around the edge of the box, the players, and they take their runs from there. Gabriel's the only player who did that, and the rest of them start like at the back corner of the 6-yard box, and so it's very, very hard. It's very hard to look to know where the ball is and to marshal your man when he's starting behind you, and even harder to kind of block his run and protect the goalkeepers. I know what you're saying, and there's truth in all of it, but it's also a really, really clever ploy.
Why, Gregor, would you set up to have everybody on the near post as City defending the corner? Why would you do that? Why would you have nobody on the back post? What is the theory behind that? It looks so unbalanced looking at it.
I don't think they're
all,
not doing
all the City shirts were in the front post, none of them at the back post.
Well, Arsenal are also very, very dangerous at the front post. They often put their corners into there, get the first contact, and they create chaos that way too. So there's no easy answer to this. I don't think they did. I think they covered the front post, and they had men marking the big guys at the back post, and they tried to mark Gabriel. Jeremy Doku tried to do it beforehand, and that didn't really work either. Kyle Walker tried to do it. It's not easy. I agree the goalkeeper coming and being big and brave like Raya was a lot in the second half would be a help, but they make it very hard for him to do that.
Talking about Arsenal's defenders, in not scoring goals, positives. Gabriel is someone who in this fixture has, not covered himself in glory sometimes. He also got a daft sending off in a game at the Emirates a few seasons ago when they first started looking like they might take on City. He is a player that to me has grown and looks like an absolute colossus, whereas maybe sometimes people thought maybe last season Saliba was the best of the two. Who would we have if you had to pick only one of them out of the two based on current form?
I think Saliba's the classier defender, but Gabriel is providing like enormous kind of stature in both boxes now. But Tom wrote about this at the weekend. I mean, you kind of analysed the two. He said like they're on the threshold of becoming one of the kind of Premier League's
Do you not think they're
best
there yet?
partnerships.
I was going to ask you don't think they're quite there yet?
I think they have to win something to do it. I think if you look at the kind of Terry Carvalho, Vidic Ferdinand, Campbell Toure, Keown Adams, they all won the title and were basically the kind of bedrock of the team when they did that. And I think if Arsenal win the league this year, then I think Gabriel and Saliba will go into that bracket. And I think if you look at the kind of consistency over the last year or two, it's unusual for, I was writing this in the piece, it's unusual these days for coaches to kind of stick with the same settled duo. You look at City, for example, it's Diaz plus another. Even at Liverpool, okay, we had Matip, but it was generally Van Dijk plus another. Real Madrid these days, it's Rudiger plus one other. It's quite unusual to kind of, it's a bit of a throwback to kind of rely on the same two all the time. And I think it's a valid question to say which one do you prefer, and I agree with Gregor. I think Saliba is the one who kind of is the more all-round defender. But you talk to people at Arsenal and they always sort of say that Gabriel is widely quite underrated, and maybe now I think, and he's heading in goals and in these kind of fixtures maybe not so much anymore.
And wearing the captain's armband
as well. Armband, yeah. But I think he's the one who, I think he's been instrumental in bringing Saliba through. It's easy to forget that it was only a couple of years ago that Saliba was basically making his debut, was coming off, a loan at Marseille, and everyone was kind of wondering, is he going to stick around? And actually, he's been kind of like a bit of a big brother for Saliba. They both talk French together, which they say is, really important to their kind of relationship. I think he's a real colossus for Arsenal, both of them together at the moment.
22 and 26 as well.
In fantasy terms, you want Gabriel, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah, you do.
In fantasy football terms,
Let's not
Alyson, you
load it
probably also want Erling Haaland, but you don't. You're not having him. Of course,
I haven't got either of them.
Man City striker, the joint second fastest player to 100 goals for the top flight club in English football, and the fastest for 96 years. Dave Halliday of Sunderland is still leading the way at 104 games, just one ahead of Dixie Dean and Erling Haaland. Alyson, just quickly a final word from you on City, because we talked a lot about Arsenal in relation to Haaland. They're playing well. But is this just kind of classic City early season, playing well, Haaland scoring lots of goals, they're not quite clicking through the gears yet? Or is there still that kind of difficulty marrying the two, City under Pep and Erling Haaland, the Colossus? Is there still a little bit of that there? Or do you think they found the nice blend now?
No, I think they're fine. And the thing is, we will never know what would have happened if it had been 11v11, and I suspect City might have won it. So, the reason I think they're working well with Haaland now is it's like they all know what he is. So that goal he scored, beautiful through ball, which a lot of strikers would have thought, I'm glad to be getting service like this, but wouldn't have had the athleticism and the sheer physicality as well as the shooting ability to just separate the Arsenal. We've just been praising the Arsenal centre-backs, and they looked a bit flimsy and naive in that moment.
Yeah.
They were separated too easily, and part of the reason is the accuracy of the through ball, but also that there's something about Haaland's physical presence, his absolute certainty that he's not like physically any other player on the pitch, and I think that has a psychological impact on defenders because they don't come across him very often, and it's really hard to know what to do in that situation. Everything's very fast, very self-assured, and you just think, oh my goodness, City. You know, we often see how City win, and Haaland might even get a hat trick, but he doesn't touch the ball that often. But they sort of embrace that now. I feel there isn't that sense of it's 2 games happening at once with City. It does feel more joined up. I think
City were outstanding in the first 15, 20 minutes as well.
Well, that's what I mean. These games, they get forgotten about, doesn't it? This start when it's a game of this craziness.
It felt like that frantic energy that they kind of only seem to reserve for the biggest games, and it was there. They were really on it, and that thing I was mentioning earlier about the spaces between Arsenal's centre half and full backs, and that those are little pockets of space that people like Bernardo Silva, Gundogan try and pick up all the time, and they were doing it, and they were getting those little pockets, and Arsenal were really like on the outer edges limits of their kind of abilities to try and keep those spaces compact and keep them outside the box and stuff. It just had the makings of an outstanding game, and then Arsenal had moments where they kept the ball, and as Tom said, they grew towards the end of the second half, but the goals changed it, and also Rodri going off changed it as well. And if they lose him for the season, that's a big turning point.
It certainly is. Tom, final word from you.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was just thinking, what's interesting about this rivalry, I think, that's developing between City and Arsenal is that for the last couple of years, it's felt like Arsenal have always been a kind of City light. They're sort of playing the City way, even with a couple of City players, and not quite doing it as well as City do. And I don't know if it's just the way that these kind of things develop that you think, well, to beat them, we have to be different to them. But it feels like Arsenal now are a nasty team, that it's not anymore the sort of Arteta ball that we saw in the first 2 or 3 years where it was all about pressing and transitions and playing lovely football. The defining factor of this team, and it's not just in the second half, but this whole season has been hard to beat, really good defence, set pieces, delaying tactics, being smart, being mean. And the Mourinho thing maybe is taking it a little bit too far, but there is that there. There is that. And if you look at what has ruffled Guardiola teams in the past, what has actually got under their skin, that is it. Because City want to play with rhythm. They want to play with fluency. They want the ball to be on the pitch and playing all the time so they can recycle it quickly. How do you beat them? You have to rattle them by being, and you can call it the dark arts, you can call it whatever you want, but this is this isn't what Arsenal have been, and I think it's quite smart because they're basically saying, how do we beat City to the title? Not only when we play them, but also across the season. We can't go out and be an open team that sort of beat teams 4-3. We have to grind, and we have to kind of find a darker way to get there. And it's not as fun to watch, but it's successful.
Yeah, it was an absolute cracker, as proved by the fact we've done the entire first half of the show all about it, but we've got loads more still to discuss. But it's quiz time. Gregor, well done for keeping it going in my absence. You have great fun asking the questions?
I wouldn't go that far. I mean, where you pitch them is difficult, so I have more sympathy for you now.
Thanks very much. That's very nice.
See how long it lasts, though.
Well, you'll see how you get on with this one.
He's not called Gregor Great Fun Robertson, is he? He's just not called
Giggles
that.
Robertson. Remember, we all remember the laughing fit he had a few weeks ago. Anyway, let's not bring that up again. Who am I talking about, though, when I say a former footballer who played as a left-back and left winger and, like Calafiori, scored the odd screamer during his time playing in the Premier League for Portsmouth, Bolton, West Ham and Burnley? Find out after the break. Hello and welcome back to the Game Football Podcast from The Times. I'm Tom Clarke and I've got Alyson Rudd, Tom Allnut and Gregor Robertson with me. Before the break, I asked you my quiz question, which, Gregor Robertson, the answer was?
Matty Taylor.
Too easy, you said.
Yeah, the first club you gave me, it came to me.
Yeah, okay, fine. Well, I'll make it harder on Thursday. Anyway, on to another cracker of a game on Sunday. Brighton 2, Forest 2. Also had lots of great goals. Also had a moderately controversial red card. We've got to give Morgan Gibbs-White praise for his Oscar-worthy performance, his impression of Pippo Inzaghi, with those remonstrations, which I thought were truly wonderful. Like, oh, come on, referee.
I'm not sure they'd agree with you.
Absolutely fantastic. But Gregor, you were there.
Yeah.
I want to start with Forest, actually, first. These two teams next to each other in the table. We're always waxing lyrical about how brilliant Brighton are. Oh, we love Brighton, don't we? Everyone's favourite team is Brighton. Forest, exactly the same points, both also unbeaten. And this was a very impressive point, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a weird game, though. I mean, they came with a game. Before the game, the the thing that made it intriguing was that Brighton under Hurtzeller have the best offside trap in the league, or they certainly did before this game. I think they had the third highest sort of defensive line after City and Tottenham. So that was a clear ploy, and we know I haven't seen Forest score that goal again at Anfield last week. Hudson-Odoi in the break, plus a load of other kind of metrics that underline there. I think they had the most shots from fast breaks, that kind of thing. They're the best counter-attacking team in the league, so there was clearly that was going to be interesting to see how it played out, and that did play a big role. I mean, the first goal, Gibbs White got him behind the back four, cut back, and Hudson-Odoi was pretty smart to get his body between Baleba and the ball and go to ground, win the penalty. And also their equaliser, when they looked like in the second half, it was just Brighton going for the third, and one really slick passing move got Lewis Dunk tried to play offside. Joe Veltman was a couple of yards deeper because he was marking Hudson-Odoi in the touchline. They broke the offside trap. Easy goal, equaliser. So that was a big theme of the game, but also other stuff just trumped it massively because in the 83rd minute it turned to bedlam after Gibbs White's challenge on João Pedro on the touchline. It was the kind of tackle that even a decade ago, I think, you get a roar from the crowd and people go, good tackle, firm but fair. Just about. I mean, he got the ball, but he's when you're watching this in the replay, he kind of went on the top of the ball. And he also sort of scissored.
Yeah, so the scissor always makes it difficult.
Yeah, it does. So
is this again the theme of the show, is that actually we're being like quietly critical of referees whilst also going, actually you kind of got that one right.
The criticism of the referee, although actually again, you're probably still true. The criticism is that initially he didn't even give a foul, and then he even made the gesture with his hands that Gibbs White got the ball. 32 seconds later, I think it was, he'd given a foul and given Gibbs White a second booking, which sent him off. And so, you also saw the kind of the partisanship on the touchline as well, and that Hurtzeller's outrage at the initial decision, so him sent off, and then Nuno's outrage at the second decision, the volte face, the change of mind.
I love the symmetry of that. It's quite lovely. So
him sent off, and then there's also the sort of little underlying sort of theme that Anthony Taylor is the guy that they have had the most issues with in the past. We remember Forest last season, that ridiculous statement after the game against Everton where they called the allegiances of the VAR at Stockley Park into question after Taylor failed to award what they thought were 3 penalties against them. I think one of them was just probably justified. So anyway, so Nuno was quite pointed in his criticism of Taylor on the touchline. Neither of the managers came out for the press conference afterwards, and both their assistants played a fantastic straight batting performance, just like Rui Silva, I think Nuno's assistant, said afterwards, I didn't hear any word from Nuno's mouth that justified a red card. And I was like, okay, so that's the way you're going to play it. So
very good.
It was a wild game, but also,
how often do you get both assistants turning up in a press?
Well, how often do you get both managers sent off?
Yeah,
not that often.
How many have you ever had that, Alyson?
Never.
Both managers
never
going
both,
there.
no.
You sometimes get one, don't you? Because normally one is outraged
happy.
and one is happy. But both of them going, oh well, if he's not going, I'm not going either.
Yeah. So maybe they agreed.
But back very briefly to the football. Nuno obviously sent off, upset in this game. But Forest is there. The
first half they
something
contained
we're
Brighton.
Seeing this season, isn't
Absolutely.
there, to be positive about?
Absolutely, they're organised and they're a real threat. You've got, we've said it many times, Alanga, Gibbs White, and Hudson-Odoi, and Chris Wood he's been outstanding for them.
Yeah,
I think he's got 19 goals in 47 games since he signed for them.
A good foil to those playing around him as well.
Absolutely, he's the focal point, and he kind of occupies defenders and allows create space for the 3 behind them. And they contained Brighton in the first half brilliantly. And Brighton scored 2 goals in I think 3 minutes just before half time. Flipped the game on its head. Did not see it coming, and then Forest did well to get a draw in the end. So, like, 2 teams who still had really positive starts and playing in different ways, but both unbeaten, and I think probably a fair result just about.
The one thing you left out, though, was that Sousa looks like Jamie Tart from Ted Lasso.
There
Did
you
you
go.
not see that?
You've got it in now. I've never seen Ted Lasso. I don't have time to watch TV. editing the Times
It's
and on this podcast.
Semi-football show, so you've got a
Nah.
reason to watch it for a while.
Don't have time. Too busy researching zingers for this show. Anyway, speaking of the Brighton game, Danny Welbeck breaking my heart, as he always does. For those of you in the Times Games podcast Fantasy Football League, anyone had a difficult weekend, spare a thought for me, because 2 weeks ago I was looking at João Pedro and Danny Welbeck to put in the team. Went Pedro. He's played like 2 minutes since, and Welbeck
And
scored limped about. Welbeck scored in both games. Anyway, I hope you're all enjoying it, those of you in the league. I feel like it's time for a little shout out. Darren Harvey is currently top. Well done, Darren. Willis Bennett is one of the only Times Sport team members anywhere near the top 10. He's currently 4th, so well done, Willis, for keeping pride intact. Alison, how are you getting on?
I'm dropping like a stone. But then I don't have Haaland and
It's
I haven't
'cause of your
wildcarded. So,
Right.
long-term view. The long view
Yeah,
here.
I had quite a good week because Eddie Howe has finally come around to my thinking from the start of the season where I put Harvey Barnes in and he kept putting him on the bench and good old Harvey kept coming and showing he was good. So I'm smarter than Eddie Howe is what we can take away from that.
That's not how fantasy works. You don't preempt the managers.
I do, yeah.
But that doesn't get you any points.
I do. That's why I don't have any time to watch TV, because I'm sat there just staring at fantasy football going, how can I guess what Eddie Howe's going to do before he does it? Anyway, I hope you're all enjoying it. I'm not going to read the code out to join the league because there's already 300 plus people in it, and the last time I did it, it made Gregor Robertson laugh so much he couldn't speak for the rest of the show. Tom, as I've mentioned a couple of times, I had a couple of weeks off, and one of the stories that I did spot whilst I was keeping an eye on things that made me smile immensely was Ange Postecoglou with his response to all the kind of haters saying, "Oh, look, mate, take a breath, do some yoga. Come on." I thought that was like an AI-generated Ange Postecoglou story. You were there for their win at the weekend, an important win, goals for Dominic Solanke and Brennan Johnson to kind of get the critics off their back. What did you make of this? And also, how was Ange in his press conference afterwards? In chipper mood?
Was he in chipper mood? Not really. No, he was in sort of Ange mode of people suggesting to him that it was a really important win for him and for various players. And
Just
him,
like I've done
not
now.
playing
right, and him kind of saying, what were you worried about? I was never bothered, kind of thing. So that was his kind of mode. It was a big win for Spurs, definitely. They needed it. I mean, they had a tough week, losing to Arsenal, scraping past Coventry with the kind of win that gives you the least amount of credit that a win can give you.
Yeah.
The fans were kind of booing his substitutions, and they just needed a victory to kind of settle the nerves and just to kind of get everyone back behind the Ange project, I think. And not only did they get that, but actually in terms of individual performances, they kind of ticked all the boxes I think that they wanted to tick. So Solanke got his first goal, and Ange was really trying to stress that he wasn't worried before the match about that. He played pretty well, yeah. Solanke's link-up play is very tidy, and I think he's giving Spurs another option in terms of going slightly more direct. They played into him much earlier, I felt, from defence, and recently Tottenham just sort of lacked a bit of urgency when they're keeping the ball in that kind of Ange way, but it's not really going anywhere, and I think Solanke gives them another option to kind of go forward, earlier, and I mean, it was an easy goal for him. He couldn't really miss, but I think very important that he got off the mark. Brennan Johnson scored a really good goal after what's been a difficult period for him. He deleted his Instagram account because he had so much criticism on social media, and there's been a lot of talk about his performances for Spurs, and he's had a good week. He scored a very important goal against Coventry in the Cup. Was it the winner or the equaliser? I can't remember. And then scored again. So that was an important game for him. And thirdly, and maybe most importantly for Tottenham, I think Maddison had a fantastic match.
Right.
He looked really back to his best, and just kind of deploying in this season a slightly deeper role, almost more of a sort of central midfield in the three, with Kulusevski playing a little bit further forward, which I think is interesting. So he's sort of playing less like a number 10 and more of a kind of number 8 almost. Very involved in the sort of pressing and chasing and harrying. And I thought he had a really good game as well. So overall,
does it feel like, just to come on to that point, because I was listening to you talk about all those players there, does it feel like this is Ange part 2 almost? We made so much last season about there's no plan B, it's plan A. But with these players and with signing Solanke, is he trying to do some things that are a bit different? Does it feel like? Is that maybe why they've kind of struggled in some games?
Yeah, I mean, you're never going to get a Postecoglou team defending like Arsenal did, no. I don't think. Maybe in 4 or 5 years' time, maybe, I don't know, but I don't see it. Gregor's shaking his head.
Nah, mate.
But I think there are some, within the kind of Postecoglou way, as it were, there are tweaks, that they have to make, I think, to kind of be a slightly more adaptable team. And yeah, these are the things, I've never subscribed to the view that Postecoglou is a kind of, narrow-minded, basic coach who only has one way of playing. He has a sort of very clear fundamental principles of how he wants to play, but within that there are adjustments, and I think this thing with Maddison is a really interesting adjustment he's making alongside Kulusevski, to be honest, who has always been a winger for Spurs and is now playing as a sort of attacking midfielder in their midfield three, so they are making adjustments. So yeah, I mean, are the fans kind of all back on board? I don't know, maybe not quite yet, but it felt a little bit like the kind of corner was just being turned a little bit. I mean, it's worth also mentioning Brentford scored after 22 seconds.
I was going to say Brentford making sure we keep all on our toes and make sure we're in the anyone missed a goal not been in the press box for before?
I was
willing to own up. Never.
I wasn't
Always
watching
there
it
on
though,
time.
because I was still sort of, when you're sort of.
Well, that's what I mean. That's what I think. Game kicks off. You don't really look up to the screen for at least, if you're watching in the office, you don't really pay attention to the absolute opening 10
until
seconds.
10-15 minutes in, and then you've done your teams and everything, and then you start watching the game.
Yeah.
So yeah, I missed it sort of live, and you think, they actually scored. But it was interesting afterwards. That it was a great goal, and Thomas Frank said afterwards, that they treat kickoffs like a set piece. He admitted it's admittedly a harder set piece to score from, but he said it's a moment in the game where you have control, you have the ball, you can set things up. And I think it's the second time they've done it. Yeah, with it to score within 25 seconds.
How almost every team now just kicks it back to the goalkeeper and boots it. No,
sounds like you're asking yourself to go back and watch all the kickoffs. Sounds like an idea that I
I'm
might
talking myself
commission.
into a feature. Yeah, that just struck me the other day. I mean, they did it in the
1,200 words,
game
please, by
yesterday as
Thursday.
well.
Thanks.
For all this kind of possession dominance and all that, it seems like winning territory now in those early moments of the game seems to be the goal.
Yeah, unless you're Thomas Frank and Brentford. Fascinating, Tom. I'm glad to hear that Ange isn't, necessarily the prickly guy that he made it sound like when he was on holiday. Alyson, you were at a game that was weird. All the listeners who are regular fans of the show and my intro would have known exactly which writer was at the game when I said why Crystal Palace against Manchester United was weird. So tell us why it was weird.
Well, it might be me. I might need counselling. It might be not have been a weird
That's
game
a separate
at all.
conversation
But
completely.
I've been doing this job 30 years, and I enjoy every match I go to. It's a job, and I still think it's a privilege to do the job. And there's always something. I felt strange during this one, and I shouldn't have, because Jan Molby was there as a pundit, and and Tony Cascarino was there, who we all love. And Tony Cascarino said to me, "Oh, Al, do you know Jan?" So I said, "I elsker dig," which is "I love you" in Danish, and I say it, but it's me and Jan's thing. I say it to him every time.
How did I not see this coming? How did
say
I
it
not
to
see
him.
that this is actually just about you and Liverpool? How did I not see this coming?
And
For God's sake.
It's a thing we have. It's a joke, and he says
between you and Jan.
he says "I love you too" back, but actually I don't know for sure he does say that. He might actually be saying, "How could I possibly love you, you strange woman?
Stop bothering me."
I'm going to take out a restraining order very soon." But anyway, so it ought to have set me up in a really good mood. I think that was countered by the fact I was sat next to somebody at Crystal Palace. They have booths with high sides, and the guy on my right decided he did no work, so I don't know why he was there, and he was leaning.
Name him.
He was leaning on. He had both arms resting on the sides, so his armpit was next to my face, and he was rather smelly, and he left food all over the workstation on the floor, and he dropped his drink, so the whole thing looked like it was just Armageddon. It was disgusting, so that put me off. And then I had, I think, a disconnect.
Here's me. Honestly, I thought you were going to make some kind of tactical observation about how Manchester United. Okay, we're getting there. Right, fine. Just checking.
Then there was the dissonance of. So Marcus Rashford was dropped by Ten Hag, and Ten Hag said beforehand, "I had no problem. There wasn't a problem for me dropping him." And anyone who cares, I think, about Man United were a little distraught because Marcus Rashford had just started to look like he was scoring and he was starting and he was looking, his body language was better, and he looked like, okay, we can start again with Marcus and we'll re-find his best form. So it seemed from a psychological management point of view, it seemed like an odd thing to do to drop him, because when he did come on, his body language had dipped back to how it was when we were all criticising him, saying, what's going on in his personal life? He doesn't look very happy. So he clearly just wasn't very happy about not starting when he's been playing well, because as a player you're thinking, what do I do? I've been playing well and I'm not starting. And you, as the journalist, you're thinking, well, I'm now I've seen live. I've only ever seen in the last couple of years, last 3 years, really seen Man United playing badly. So I was expecting something embarrassing, and they played really well. They passed the ball beautifully. I'm an Eriksen fan, so that there's that slight bias that comes in. I'm prepared to admit, but he was excellent. He was just making sure that the passing was metronomic and intelligent. There was lots of small triangles around. They were very calm and composed. Really outplayed Palace in midfield, and should have scored and didn't. But again, as a journalist, you get a sense whether a goal's going to come or not, and it didn't. And you knew it wasn't going to, so they hit the crossbar twice, and you think, well, that's probably it then, isn't it? And Palace annoyed me. They'd beaten United 4-0 in May.
Yeah.
And you think, well, you're going to be up for this, aren't you? But they weren't. They were really quite poor and very passive and without energy or emotion in the first half. They did improve in the second half, and again, they should have scored 2 and didn't. And Eze missed a near sitter and was distraught for it. But it was one of those strange 0-0s where you just know both sides are almost need or waiting for the opposition to score before they can move up a gear. So there's this sort of no man's land football, which I found slightly distasteful because there just wasn't the passion there. and so I left Selhurst feeling like, oh God, that wasn't a privilege at all. And I've never really felt that before, and there was no one else Danish to talk to, so I was miserable.
How sad. Can I ask you 2 quick questions about the football, not about Jan Molby or about your Danish pronunciations? Manchester United's
Nothing
defence.
wrong with my pronunciation.
Of that, I have absolutely no doubt. Tak for day. There you go. See, you didn't see that coming, did
No, I
you? You're
didn't.
like, oh, I'm the only one who can speak Danish on here. I watched The Killing as well, Alyson. Okay. Manchester United's back 4. Dalot left back, Martinez, De Ligt, Mazraoui. So much has been made, and Tom talked earlier about Arsenal's settled defence. What did the back 4 look like? I know you're saying they weren't necessarily maybe put under much pressure, but Ten Hag has had so many problems with injuries. Obviously, 3 of these 4 are players that he's played for him before at Ajax. Did it look like a kind of back 4 that, oh yeah, this looks like a load of players who've played together before and look comfortable together?
Yeah, they did look comfortable together. They're not there yet. And I mean, we all remember De Ligt when he first broke onto the scene thinking, wow, he's going to be an absolute superstar. And I think he started quite quietly and unimpressively for United. But there were signs that he's going to be really important at set pieces attacking as well as defending. He had 2 headers and should have scored at least one of them. And he's a good physical presence. And I think the relationships there could grow, and he's probably a player that just needs minutes under his belt while he gets to grips with the Premier League, and he might end up being the defender we thought he would be.
Interesting. And I wanted to ask you about Palace. Eddie Nketiah, one of their big signings, and obviously the subject of Tony Cascarino's piece on the Times website. Frustration Tony's expressing about signing a player like Nketiah and then seemingly playing him as a kind of half number 10 wide player. Did that add to your frustration watching that, or is that something that Palace have got to work out how to get him in the team?
Yeah, I can see why they're playing Mateta as their centre forward, but he doesn't do the sort of things that someone like Nketiah needs. He doesn't hold up the ball and play little balls out to someone who might have want to play off him, and so there's no partnership there. Nketiah is stuck on the right, and doesn't seem to have the confidence maybe to do what Eze does on the other side. Eze, he's normally on the left but covers all ground and looks like the pivotal figure, and has, even though he missed a sitter, he has the personality to remember that he's someone who's going to create havoc for the opposition defenders. And Nketiah, I think probably Tony's right, he needs to play a more central role, or be given the freedom, even though he's nominally on the right and sometimes playing at right back nearly. He needs to be given that freedom to play centrally if he wants to, just to express himself more. Because I think this is part of Tony's point, was he's come from Arsenal and he's gone to Crystal Palace, which is a step down, but you want to feel like you've made the step down to be a bigger player. You're a bigger fish in a smaller pond. You're a big, relatively expensive signing for a club that doesn't spend a lot of money. Somehow they need to make that connection with him on the pitch, that he's vital to them. He looks inhibited to me.
Why don't they play them together in a sort of a two? It feels like Mateta and Nketiah would be perfectly sort of designed.
Does that negate Eze though? That's, I think, part of the thing. Was they're trying to lots of things for Oliver Glasner to work out. Palace without a win yet so far this season, but they have got 3 points. So I wanted to finish with the teams who have all only got one and sit in the bottom 3 places, because it's time to play. Sports editor gets carried away and starts talking about who's going to get sacked, even though there's only been 5 games to go, only 5 games gone. Southampton, Everton and Wolves all only with a point. Gregor, I want to start with you talking about Southampton. You wrote about Russell Martin before the weekend, saying, worries they might be the new Burnley. Must have been cheering that Ipswich late equaliser that helped prove your point. Otherwise, he would have been going, "Ha, showed you, Gregor." Which of any of these teams? This is for everyone. Just kind of quick fire to finish the show. Would we be worried about any of these teams? Because you've got Sean Dyche at Everton. If Sean Dyche was sacked by Everton, it's the classic thing of they'd hire Sean Dyche for this situation, wouldn't they? Gary O'Neill done brilliantly at Wolves, and Russell Martin deserves huge credit for getting Southampton up, and it's too early yet, isn't it? But are we worried about any of them and the starts they've made so far?
Out of the 3, I would be most worried about Southampton.
Right.
I think Everton, although they keep conceding late goals, like you're seeing in a lot of their games, you've seen positive performances. And I know that you can't just sort of disregard the fact that they keep conceding late goals, but there are a lot of positive things. And in this game, particularly Element and Die, Wolves are kind of the same as True. I mean, they were good in this game against Villa. They took the lead, and then they were kind of Villa up to levels that were hard to kind of. It was hard to hold back the tide, and even then, it was like he was bemoaning afterwards individual errors and stuff. Southampton. The piece I wrote was like, Russell Martin is going to stick to the same way of playing no matter what, really, and there are kind of bigger questions I think around them about how that approach kind of correlates with their likelihood of them staying in the Premier League. Yeah, and a lot of their wounds have been self-inflicted throughout the season so far. I kind of looked at all their goals, and they've all fallen into, apart from one, I think, Garnacho's against Man United. All their goals have either been a mistake from playing out in their own defensive third, or the second phase of a set play. And this goal was also a second phase of a set play. It was a deflected shot. It was a bit unlucky, but it was headed, and no one was on the edge of the box. Yeah. And again, the sort of those things have been a downfall. So for me, I would say Southampton. But I also admire a lot about Russell Martin.
Absolutely, both things can be true. I just wanted a kind of quick overview. Any disagreement, guys, on those teams at the bottom? On Gregor's assessment of those 3?
I worry a bit about Wolves. I just feel they let Neto go, let Kilman go. I wonder if they sort of look a bit light. That they didn't really replace those guys. And I think we've seen before in the Premier League. I mean, we were all saying what a brilliant job Gary O'Neill did last season, and he did 100%. But I feel like sometimes you do get coaches who have fantastic starts and have a good season or two, and then sort of levels out. Maybe the impact of what they're saying starts to reduce. I still think they'll probably be fine, but I would worry a bit about them. I do think it's interesting, sort of zooming out. I remember 6 months or so ago, we all kind of thought that the teams going down from the Premier League would be replaced by 3 coming up, and that it would be a really kind of improvement in quality. The Ipswich, Southampton, Leicester would all kind of come up and maybe be in the middle of the table rather than the bottom. And to be honest, that doesn't look like it's going to be the case. It looks like all 3 of them are going to be down there, and I think it just kind of speaks to not only the gap between the Premier League and the Championship that still exists, but also that kind of adaptation you have to go through. You can play brilliant football in the Championship, and then you get tested at another level, and it's a different thing.
Yeah, Alyson, final word from you on those bottom 3.
I was really shocked when I looked at the table this morning and saw Wolves were bottom. I had no idea they were anywhere near the relegation zone, because I've seen them play and thought, oh, they're playing well.
So no worries about Wolves
whatsoever.
No worries
about them whatsoever, except that it's worrying in itself. You can be playing well and only have 1 point. Yeah. That's odd.
Like, they're playing well, but what Tom's saying is true. They do look lighter than last season, and you do worry whether they have the kind of the metal at the back and stuff now, or they I don't know, this is the same level of quality. Gary O'Neill's still doing the same work, but they're not getting the same results. They have had the hardest start of any team in the league, really, I think. Yeah. Very difficult start.
And it is really annoying when you see a player like Neto, who was among my players of the season last season. He was injured for a lot of it, but when he played, he was astonishingly good, really good, had everything. And he's gone to Chelsea, and he's already a bit part player.
Mm.
And you just think, oh, honestly, what do you want as an individual in your life? Wouldn't you rather be the star player at Wolves than
You
a
were
bit
already
part player at
sad enough
Chelsea?
after Palace 0 Manchester United 0. That's not going to make you even more sad, Alyson Rudd,
Okay.
especially at the end of the
Sorry.
show. Well, there you go. We started at the top and we finished at the bottom, and we had a right good laugh in between. Alyson Rudd, Tom Allnut and Gregor Robertson, thank you very much for joining me. Thank you too for listening. We'll be back on Thursday.